Hello everyone, this is Jake from Fife Paranormal, and today's video is going to be an interesting one to say the least. It's also going to be one of the longer videos I've ever done. Growing up in a religious area, I attended church many Sundays and even spent my first few years of elementary school in a Christian school. And upon my readings of the Bible, I have stumbled across some very interesting accounts of giants, monsters, ghosts, and possibly aliens. But there is one topic that I've spent a very long time researching, and today I will be exploring the story of one of the race of giants in the Bible, the Nephilim. I understand that this is going to be a very controversial video, so let me make it very clear that I am going to approach this with great care. I also want to say that there are countless interpretations of this story, and in this video I'm going to be giving my interpretations of what is written in the scripture. You can either agree or disagree with me, I really don't care and I don't mind, and I would love to hear your opinions on this topic. With that out of the way, let's take a look at one of the most interesting mysteries of the Bible. Before we dive headfirst into the complexities of this, let's look at some basic information so that we can familiarize ourselves with a basic description and understanding of who the Nephilim were. According to Wikipedia, the Nephilim were the offspring of the sons of God and the daughters of men. The word Nephilim has been translated as fallen due to a similarity in the Hebrew text, and in a loose translation found in some Bibles, it has been translated to giants. Something I found interesting is that there are several mentions of giants in the Bible, but they do not always describe them as Nephilim. For example, Goliath is considered to be a giant, but he is not considered a Nephilim. With this introduction, we can now dive deeper into the complexities of the Nephilim and into this biblical mystery. The first mention of the Nephilim in the Bible is in Genesis chapter 6, verses 1 through 4. This is important because these verses come before the story of Noah's flood. These verses put together read, "When men began to increase in number on the earth and daughters were born to them, the sons of God saw that the daughters of men were beautiful, and they married any of them they chose. Then the Lord said, My spirit will not contend with man forever, for he is mortal. His days will be 120 years. The Nephilim were on the earth in those days, and also afterward, when the sons of God went to the daughters of men and had children by them. They were the heroes of old, men of renown." Then verse 5 hits us with, "The Lord saw how great man's wickedness on the earth had become, and that every inclination of the thoughts of his heart was only evil all the time." So what does all this mean? I believe this means that as humanity began to grow, the sons of God, we'll get to them in a minute, saw that some of the women were beautiful and wanted to take them as their wives. So they came down to earth and bred with the women, creating a hybrid human that could possibly have immortality. And that's why the verse mentions that God cannot deal with man forever and that humans are meant to be mortal and only live to a certain age. It's also key to point out that the Bible mentions the Nephilim were around before and after the Great Flood. The Nephilim are also described as the heroes of old. So, is this a reference to some of the heroes mentioned in Greek mythology and other religions? Many people believe that early versions of the Bible featured a polytheistic view of religion, and that over time it was whittled down to only believing and worshiping in one God. I think early versions tried to explain some key figures in other religions, such as Achilles in Greek mythology, as Nephilim to explain why they were so powerful and held in such high regard. The next mention of the Nephilim doesn't come until the book of Numbers in chapter 13, verse 33. Mind you, this is after the flood, which states, "And there we saw the Nephilim, the sons of Enoch, who came of the Nephilim, and we were in our own sight as grasshoppers, and so we were in their sight." Context is very important here, so let's back up a little bit. In this chapter, Moses sent out 12 scouts to scout the land of Canaan for 40 days to search for a future home for the Israelites. This is the only verse to refer to the Nephilim as giants. We aren't told what happens to the Nephilim when the Israelites finally do move into the area, and the ultimate fate of the Nephilim is unknown. With these two scriptures, we can go crazy coming up with theory after theory about who they were, what happened to them, or what they're supposed to represent, but we may never know the truth about the Nephilim. So, earlier I mentioned the sons of God who bred with earth women and possibly created the Nephilim. So who were the sons of God? Some people believe that the sons of God is a reference to the angels, and that some of them rebelled and went to earth to mate with women. Another belief is that they are a reference to the offspring of Seth, who rebelled and mated with the daughters of man. Basically, a lot of rebellion going on. It's important to note that Job chapter 1 verse 6 and Psalm chapter 29 verse 9 use the term sons of God when referring to angels only. In the New Testament, Jesus mentions that angels never marry or are given marriage. So does this mean that in Genesis, some angels tried to marry, and as a result of this came the creation of the Nephilim, which brought the flood? The belief that the sons of God means angels goes all the way back to the 1st century AD, and many biblical scholars agree with this view. There's also a view that says that they were angels that rebelled with Satan, and while they were banished on earth, they bred with humans, and that is the origin of the Nephilim. Regardless of who they are, the sons of God are usually represented as being non-human in origin, aside from the sons of Seth theory. It may seem like we're getting into some complex stuff here, but we're about to get really deep here in a second. Supposedly the Nephilim had children called the Elioid. I probably should have warned you all sooner that I'm going to butcher a lot of these pronunciations, but I'm just going to go with it, and I'm very sorry. The Elioid are not mentioned in the King James Version or other English Bibles, but they are mentioned in the Book of Enoch and the Book of Jubilees. We'll talk about these books later, but let's go quickly over the Book of Jubilees. The Book of Jubilees is an ancient Jewish religious work of 50 chapters considered canonical by the Ethiopian Orthodox Church as well as Beta Israel. It's considered as one of the falsely attributed works of the Bible by Roman Catholics, Protestants, and Eastern Orthodox churches. However, early writings by Christian writers reference the book as canon, although it's not considered canon now. Removed books of the Bible is a topic for another day, so we'll get back to the Elioid. The Elioid are half-human, half-angel hybrids fathered by the Nephilim, and they are also mentioned in the Book of Giants and the Book of Enoch. In the Book of Enoch, it mentions that when the sons of God mated with the women, they gave birth to the Watchers. The Watchers will also be covered later, because that's very interesting. But they gave birth to the Watchers, who were the first great giants. The giants brought the Nephilim, and then the Nephilim brought forth the Elioid. This seemingly contradicts the origin of the Nephilim in the Book of Genesis, but it does give us a lineage of these giants, mainly the Nephilim. To have a better understanding of all this information, let's dive into the Book of Enoch. This is where the video is going to get really controversial. The Book of Enoch is found in the Dead Sea Scrolls, but it is not considered canon by really anyone aside from the Ethiopian Church. Fun fact, the Ethiopian Church also allegedly has possession of the Ark of the Covenant, and there have been a lot of strange deaths by people who have claimed to have guarded the Ark of the Covenant. But back to Enoch. The Book of Enoch is basically the Old Testament version of Revelations, and it's pretty dark and disturbing. Enoch is mentioned in the canon Bible, and there's even a reference to the Book of Enoch in the Bible. Enoch was the great-grandfather of Noah, and is said to have been taken into heaven by God at the age of 365, kind of like we have 365 days in the year. An important distinction here is that Enoch never dies. Mentioned in the Book of Enoch is the origin of demons, giants, why some angels fell from earth, why the great flood was necessary, and the coming 1,000-year reign of the Messiah, as well as a bunch of other stuff that is almost like an acid trip, trust me. The older sections of the chapter, including the Book of Giants, is said to have been written around 300 to 200 BC, and the latest part was probably written around 100 BC. The Book of the Watchers is interesting to us because it describes the fall of the Watchers, the angels who fathered the Nephilim, and it talks about Enoch's visit to heaven. A video about the Book of Enoch is coming in the future, don't worry. But today we're just going to focus on the Nephilim. In the Book of Enoch, it mentions several fallen angels and their offspring who taught humanity many things. The one I want to highlight is Azazel, who is said to have taught humanity how to make swords and knives, shields, and breastplates, and also introduced man to the metals on earth and what they can do. Basically introduced warfare to humanity. Enoch chapter 7 mentions that eventually the Watchers grew tired of humans and soon started breeding with animals, which created giant monsters. Could this be a reference to dinosaurs? I think it's possible, but pretty much the Watchers went insane and lived it up like it was spring break all the time. The Book of Enoch then states that the Nephilim started to dominate humanity because they were half angel, and while their parents, the Watchers, were going crazy, the Nephilim became great warriors and rose to positions of power and eventually started fighting with each other and using their humans as soldiers in their wars. Later, it is revealed to Enoch by an angel that God made the flood happen because the earth was overrun with the bloodline of the Nephilim and that it needs to be cleansed of their lineage. Apparently, Noah's bloodline was the most pure, and that's why he was able to survive, but it's pretty quick on its explanation of Noah's bloodline. The book of Enoch also says that God will allow a small percentage of the spirits of Nephilim to wander the earth as demons, and they are allowed to roam, trying to tempt man into sin until the Messiah comes back and rids the world of them again. As you can tell, there's a lot going on in this book, and I haven't even scratched the surface of the book of Enoch yet. You would think this is where our research ends, but we're missing one more important piece of the puzzle. Our last stop will take us into the tales of the second oldest religious text in the world, the Epic of Gilgamesh. Just like Enoch, this book deserves its own video, but today we're just going to focus on information that relates to the Nephilim. Some basic knowledge is needed though. The Epic of Gilgamesh is older than the Bible, and many of the stories found in the Epic of Gilgamesh can be found in the Bible. This is probably because the Epic of Gilgamesh is written in Sumerian, and Abraham of the Bible is Sumerian, and many people believe he brought these stories into the main Bible, or that later biblical writers adapted these stories from Gilgamesh into the Bible and claimed it as their own. Gilgamesh is described as a half-human, half-divine hybrid, which fits into the description of a Nephilim, and he's also described as a great warrior. In order to curb Gilgamesh's seemingly harsh rule, the god Anu causes the creation of Enkidu, a wild man who at first lives among animals. Now, soon after, Enkidu, which I know I'm probably butchering that, is initiated into the ways of city life and travels to Uruk, where Gilgamesh awaits him. There's a big battle between the two, and Gilgamesh ultimately wins. The rest of it is basically a series of adventures and some really cool stories that are worth reading. Now, it is interesting to note that the Book of Giants in the Qumran talks about the gathering of Nephilim who had received a vision of the flood, and one of the Nephilim named is Gilgamesh. Gilgamesh fits all the descriptions of a Nephilim. In the Epic of Gilgamesh, it even mentions that he is the survivor of a great flood and must repopulate with the remaining women to grow his kingdom back to its former glory. This might explain the mention of the Nephilim still being around in the Book of Numbers. Like I mentioned earlier, early versions of the Bible try to bring characters from other religions into its canon by explaining them as Nephilim or other hybrids, and I think that's what the Bible tried to do with Gilgamesh as well. So now that we have a good idea about the history of the Nephilim, we have to ask ourselves something. Are the Nephilim still around? Many people don't think the Nephilim are around because they never existed in the first place. I disagree with this, and I think the Nephilim are still around. The Bible never states that the Nephilim died out, and if you look at medieval history and early human history, there are many stories of giants, and also giants that were great fighters. I think the Nephilim were in small numbers after the flood, and they were never able to recover because in order to create more, they needed human women. And as human technology advanced, they were able to protect themselves from Nephilim, and that led to the Nephilim population becoming smaller and smaller. Every culture has legends of giants, and it's possible that some of these were the remnants of Nephilim. One story that sticks out in my mind are the giants of Lovelock Cave that are mentioned in several tribes' legends. The Choctaw, Comanche, and Navajo Indians all talked about there being a race of white giants that were 10 feet tall, had mining technology, and were great warriors, and even enslaved lesser tribes. The Great Spirit is said to have wiped these giants out in the West when they became too proud and arrogant. There are also stories from the Cherokee about white Indians living in West Virginia and Kentucky that were eventually all killed in battle. And believe it or not, there's even a story that George Washington found a cemetery full of giants while constructing Fort Loudon in Virginia. I can make a whole video again about giants in America, but I think I've seen enough to say that it's possible that Nephilim not only survived, but they might have thrived in the Americas up until about the 1500s. We may never know the truth about who the Nephilim were, but it does seem like they are found in almost every religion, every culture, and almost every society. It's cool to connect the dots between religions and the canonization of several main characters in other religions. It's almost like the first Marvel Cinematic Universe in terms of crossovers and scale, but this is obviously much larger than a movie franchise. As stated at the beginning, every opinion given in this video is my own, and I could be right and I could be wrong. I invite you to come up with your own opinions and theories about ancient giants and the Nephilim. Would you like to see us do more videos about mysteries of the Bible or about some of the stuff I mentioned in this video? Comment your thoughts below. Just be sure to keep it respectful. I would love to hear your thoughts. Thank you all for watching this video. Leave a like if you enjoyed it. Be sure to subscribe for more videos posted weekly. And once again, I'm Jake from Fife Paranormal. Have a great day, everyone.